One of the biggest mistakes I've made in my garden is starting too early. I get very excited. While I try very hard not to be a season pusher, I get very excited and think that, hey, if I start earlier, my seedlings will be my seeds will be planted, my seedlings will be a lot bigger by the time the season starts, and I'll be good to go. I'll be off to a head start. And while there is some truth to that, I've actually lost a lot of crop and hurt my garden because, for example, tomatoes, I started them too early. They were way too big in the greenhouse, and therefore I had to put them out, but it wasn't time yet. So then I lost a decent amount, or they were just kind of damaged and didn't produce as well as they could have because frosts came late, or honestly on time, and I was just hoping that it wouldn't come. For example, here in New York, where I am, the last frost date, expected frost is April 15th. I probably put them out like April 1st. We got a couple frosts after then, and it didn't kill them, but it damaged them and they didn't produce as well. So my goal this year is to try to start things on time and not push the season, and therefore I will have less problems as to where to put things because I need to put them in the ground ASAP when it's too cold, and it just causes unnecessary stress. So I'm trying to take stress out of my life this season, and then also trying to plant things when they're intended, and therefore they will thrive rather than, and the more they thrive, the less actually I need in the garden. For example, maybe I don't need to plant 100 tomato plants this year like I did last year. Maybe I can plant 50, and if they thrive, I won't need as many, and I won't need as much space, and I won't need as much work. So there's a lot entailed in that, but I want to go through a guide step by step, month by month, what you can plant, when you can start the seedlings, what you can put outdoors, and when. So we're going to start off in January, which is where I am right now. It's in January, it's early January, and I'm just starting to plan ahead. What you can start then is like your long storage onions. For example, I do long day onions. I'll do a different video about the different types of onions, but there's long day, intermediate day, and short day, depending on where you are in the country. Southern does short day. It all has to do about how much sun is in the sky and how long your days are. Intermediate does kind of middle of the country. I could probably do intermediate day onions, but then I do long day just because I like them. I like the storage availability of them or accessibility of them. So that being said, I can start my onions pretty soon. I'll put them in the greenhouse with some heating mats. I also have a heater in my greenhouse too, like one of those heaters, like a room heater. I keep the greenhouse closed. It's not this greenhouse. This greenhouse is made out of like a plastic like this, but I have a hard plastic greenhouse. It's much smaller. But that being said, hold on, my dog's gonna get a rat trap, and I don't want him to get caught. So let me get him out of there. Out, out, out. So one of the problems I've been having is rats in this greenhouse. I dug out a ton of space in it, and they're still figuring out ways to get in. So I have some snap traps around here, and I got peanut butter, so I don't want him to be drawn to the peanut butter. I'm trying to get rid of them before spring comes, but it's probably not going to be the case. So getting back into that, we have onions. I'm going to be starting my onions in the greenhouse with some grow lights. Grow lights are really important, particularly in the winter, because there's not enough sun, and sometimes they can become, your seedlings can become a little leggy. We don't want that. So we want them to be strong, sturdy, stocky, and not leggy. So leggy is when they kind of get spindly and kind of what they're doing is they're searching for the light. So we're going to start in January. We're going to start our certain alliums, which are, like I said, our long day onions. You can sow them really nicely, they don't mind being bunched. You can, because their roots are really strong, so you can kind of just do an open tray, sprinkle a ton in there, and then you can break them apart later. Now, transplanting these onions when they're ready, you can do like early March, kind of a couple weeks before your last frost, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 4 weeks before your last frost. Depending on how big they are and how strong they are, you can put them out there. Next, we have brassicas. So this is late January, early February. Brassicas include kale, cabbages, cauliflower. Actually, cabbages I think fall in the brassicas, but we're going to continue them, put them in brassicas here. But your broccolis, things like that, the kohlrabis, those are all brassicas. Those can, like I said, can be started in late January, early February. They are very cold tolerant. So again, key is the grow light, keeping the grow light relatively close to them. If the grow light's too far from them, they're going to, again, be searching for that light, and it's going to cause a problem. They're going to become spindly. So they can, you don't have to keep it 70 degrees, 80 degrees. In fact, if it's too warm, they'll start getting spindly as well. They'll start getting leggy. So you want to keep them 55, 60 degrees. Great temperature. Honestly, it will also keep your heat bill lower. So I might not even consider using heat mats for them. I might just heat the room, try to keep it around 65 degrees. So you could start those then, and then you can transplant those a little bit later. The brassicas can be transplanted now late February, early March, depending on what your weather looks like. If you need to, you can use row covers. I recommend going to Home Depot, and maybe I'll make another video out of this, and buying the PVC conduit pipe. It's relatively inexpensive. You can cut it to the size you want rather than buying them online, buying the connectors to do row covers online. It gets very expensive very quickly. A really great hack is to just buy them from Home Depot. You can buy like a 30-foot spool of it and just cut it to the lengths you want, and then you can use those, and they're way stronger and way more sturdy than the ones online. So those can go out in February, late February, early March, again, depending on your temperature. You don't want them to get too big. The concern is, like, you would actually think, oh, the bigger they are, the better to go in the garden. It's true only if your pot can handle it. They do really well with 4 to 6 true leaves out, and then you can put them out in the garden. Otherwise, they get root bound, and they don't do well with root binding. Another thing you can start in late February, again, late February, depending on where you're, this is all from my zone, but depending on where you are, you're going to adjust accordingly. Like I said, my last expected frost date is April 15th. So if you're 2 weeks later, if I'm saying late February, maybe you do, like again, say you're May 1st, you do maybe early March. You just kind of adjust accordingly slightly. Like a week or two is not going to be too crazy of a difference depending on where you are. If you're in zone 3, it's a very different story than if you're on zone 8. I'm in zone 7B. So what you can do in February is starting to chit your potatoes. What I do, you can buy seed potatoes, you can for sure, and maybe they will work really, really well for you, but they get kind of expensive depending on if you're really trying to do a lot of potatoes. I don't typically save the seed of my potatoes because I usually do one really large harvest in like July, maybe August, and they don't last as well. They do last, but they don't last as well for using as seed potatoes the following year. So what I do is I actually buy the same variety of potato that I used to plant. I buy them from my farmer's market, a big 50-pound bag at the end of the year in November, and those are really like strong, sturdy potatoes, bigger potatoes. I use those as my chitting potatoes, and I eat the ones that I grow, and it's just a cycle. It's essentially, it's the same potato. I just am kind of essentially using them as seed potatoes. So chitting the potato is putting them in a relatively warm, sunny area, and they start to grow those sprouts, the eyes we call them. Then you can prepare those to be put out in, depending on where your area is, but in like March. Start chitting them in February. Now let's talk some root crops. Root crops entail like things like turnips and radishes and carrots and drawing a blank on beets. So root crops typically do not do well with transplants because they're the roots, and if the roots get disturbed, they don't grow as well. So typically it's not recommended to transplant most root crops. However, there are some that you can get away with. And in fact, I actually think you can get away with most of them except carrots and parsnips. Carrots and parsnips do not transplant very well. I highly recommend you direct sow them. They can be direct sown as soon as your soil is workable. So for example, it'd probably be March, meaning workable, meaning not frozen. There is a sweet spot, so you want to try a couple different times, because if it's too cold and too moist, they'll rot and slugs will eat them. If it's too dry, they won't germinate. They need to stay moist the entire time you are growing them or germinating them. So for me, that's a bit about March. Radishes are a bit more cold hardy. You can do them in like February, direct sow them. However, radishes, turnips, and beets can absolutely be started in cells. You don't want them to get too big, but if you do them pretty well, and I like multi-sowing them. You put 3 or 4 in a little tray. They do really, really well together. So I highly recommend that. They can be, like I said, February, depending on the temperature, direct sown. March, if you want to put them in cells so that they're ready to go out. In fact, depending on the size of them, you might even be able to get away with them in March with seedlings, just with some coverage. Let's talk leafy greens. Highly recommend direct sowing spinach. You need a lot of spinach to grow to make it actually worth your while. So grow more than you think, because it doesn't produce a ton. Those you can be direct sown in March. I've done seeds like cells of spinach. It works. It's just incredibly tedious to put it like for the amount you need, for how much you have to grow to transplant them. It's a lot of work. And again, my goal is to work efficiently, smartly. Smartly is not a word, but efficient and well. So that said, direct sowing, like again, when your soil is workable, March for most leafy greens. However, you can start lettuces a bit earlier, late February, in cells in the greenhouse. In fact, actually, you could probably even get away with it in an unheated greenhouse with lettuces. They are actually pretty cold hardy. They do pretty decent in the cold. Not freezing, but cold, chilly, you know. So you can do your chards late February, early March. Start seeding those things. They don't need, again, super warm weather. You actually, in fact, if they're too warm, they will become spindly, and again, they need light. So you might need some sort of supplemental light to help them out. Now let's talk herbs. One of my favorite things to grow in the garden, and in fact, tends to be one of my most productive items in the garden. Oregano, thyme, sage, start those in February. They are very slow growers. They are very rewarding to grow. If you grow them well, man, sometimes I have too much time. I wish I had actual time, like time, but I have too much time. The herb sometimes. I end up using it. It's really versatile for cooking and also for medicinal uses. Really great antimicrobial, preventing getting sick and stuff like that. However, start those in February. They are very slow growers, but things like the more warm-loving things like basil, it is a relatively slow grower as well. However, it is notoriously loves warmth. So if it gets too cold too quickly, it's not going to do well. Other things you can start early, like things like parsley and cilantro, depending where you are, called coriander. Same exact herb, just different parts of the herb. Cilantro is the leafy green. Coriander is the seed of cilantro. So that being said, you can absolutely start those in, my dog is climbing in my compost pile. I got to get him out of there right now. But you can absolutely start those in February. Some more late February items you can grow, or vegetables you can grow, are your peppers and your eggplants and your certain like long day things. For example, I grow tobacco, so that's going to get started in February as well. Again, these things need warmth, so these will absolutely all need heating mats. And in fact, I might, depending on where the other things in the garden and the greenhouse are, bump up the temperature to 70 degrees in the greenhouse. You don't want to, again, too warm. If it's too warm, they will get spindly. It's a very hard thing to manage because if it's 30 degrees outside and it's 70 degrees in there, the sun comes out. Now the 70 degrees, because the door is closed because you're trying to keep the warmth in, now becomes 100 degrees. It's a very hard thing to manage, and also where it is in the greenhouse. If it's like, like belt level, chest level, that's where I like to keep things. But I have rows up here as well in my other greenhouse. It's great for space, but it gets really hot. It's like a 15, 20 degree difference between right up here on the top of it versus down here. So keep in mind, they can very quickly, first of all, they dry out quicker up here and they get scorched. I've lost a lot of seedlings to getting scorched by the sun. So be careful of where you put things in the greenhouse. So those peppers, eggplants, tobacco can be started in late February. However, those all need to stay in the greenhouse until well past your first frost. In fact, I would probably not put them out until probably May. They're relatively slow growers, but you don't want them to, they can't handle any frost risk. Where for example, your brassicas and your root crops, those can all handle a little bit of frost depending on how big they are. Your alliums, things like that. Warm weather crops, tomatoes, tobacco, eggplants, peppers, can't handle any, so you want to be well past your frost date. That being said, let's talk tomatoes. My biggest problem is I've had tomatoes grow too big too quickly in the greenhouse. I'm trying to avoid that this year, so I actually have more healthier tomatoes. And that being said, I'm probably not going to start mine until March. It'll give them still probably at least 8 weeks before they're even ready to go out into the garden. Let me say this. I don't typically always follow the directions of the back of the seed packet. And I want to recommend you experiment. Try things. Try what's recommended on the seed packet. But that's meant to, how many people buy them? Like millions of people buy that seed packet. They have to put something generic for millions of people, right? Find what works best for you in your zone, in your growing conditions. I have a greenhouse. I have this is more of my polytunnel. So I have a polytunnel, so I can grow things differently. I can put things, it stays significantly warmer in here than outside, so I can grow things at different speeds than other people. That being said, other things like other leafy greens that I forgot to mention before, that you could start with the other cold hardy leafy greens, like the a couple things. I'm my brain's starting to click. We got some like the broccoli robs, the bok choys and stuff like that. Those can be started late February, early March. They can handle a bit of cooler weather as well, especially with some frost covering. I wanted to show something really quickly. This is the polytunnel. I have not watered it once since October. It's now January. Things are still thriving in here. And I got lettuce right here. We've had some really cold days, and it's still alive. It's still thriving. Still totally, maybe a little bit of frost burn right here, but I would totally eat this. So things are significantly harder than you think. I just try to push your garden, try to push the plants. Maybe it won't be as productive, maybe, but like experiment. You have nothing to lose. Now, lastly, let's talk direct sowers in the warm weather. Things like corn, things like beans, which beans you can technically grow in seed trays a little earlier. I have done that and been very successful with that. Things like squashes, all of those are recommended to be direct sown. Again, you have to know your garden. If you have significant pest pressure like rats or like chipmunks or like squirrels that will dig up the seeds, well, you either protect them with row covers or you protect them with hot pepper flakes or you protect them by starting them in seed trays. I've done all of them. I've pushed seedlings in seed trays significantly. Squashes, things that they recommend putting in the ground. It's worked. Would it work better if I didn't? Sure, possibly, but I can get started a lot quicker. I can also prevent things being eaten. So when things are cold still, this is really important. When things are cold, there's less food for the animals, so the first foods they're going to go for, the bunnies, the raccoons, the birds, are your leafy greens, the things that you're putting on the garden. So keep an eye out, see how you can protect them. But all those things I'd recommend till probably May, at least in my area, because you want the ground to warm up a little, even if it's not frost anymore, even if it's 70-degree weather, the ground is a little cooler. So maybe don't push them. They'll just sit in the ground. They probably won't even sprout. But you never know, because you know what? How many times I've had random squashes growing in the garden because a seed was dropped or tomato that was dropped. It's amazing. The garden is significantly harder than you think. So that is my ultimate guide to recommending when to start your certain seedlings. Again, adjust according to your temperature, according to your growing zone. One last one I forgot are peas. Those are very cold tolerant. You could probably put those out. Again, if you use row coverings, probably gives you an extra 2 to 4 weeks earlier. But probably I would say March. I'm sorry, no, February. You probably get away with them. Putting them in the ground. You could start them in seedling trays as well. You just got to monitor certain things like that. You just have to monitor how big they get, because you don't want them to get too big, otherwise to become root bound. I hope you enjoy this. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I'll see you in the next video. If there's anything specific you'd like to learn about or talk about, let me know in the comments.